The last human. Commander Alex Carter floated in the darkness of space. His escape pod drifted slowly, far away from any planet or space station. The control panel flickered with red warning lights. Oxygen levels were dropping. Food and water were almost gone. He was alone. The last battle had destroyed his ship. The enemy came without warning, attacking from the shadows. The rest of his crew never made it. He had watched them die, one by one. Now he was the only human left. Alex leaned back, staring out of the small window. Stars twinkled in the distance. Space was endless, cold, and empty, a graveyard for those who fought in forgotten wars. His fingers tightened into fists. He refused to die like this. Then a sudden beep broke the silence. His tired eyes snapped to the radar. A signal, weak but clear. A distress call. Alex's heart pounded. Who could it be? No humans were left. He had sent out his own distress call for days, but no one answered. This signal was different. It wasn't from his ship. It wasn't from Earth. His fingers moved quickly over the controls. The location of the signal appeared on the screen. A derelict space station hidden inside an asteroid field. It was dangerous. No sane pilot would go there. But Alex had no choice. He either followed the signal or he died alone in space. Taking a deep breath, he adjusted the pod's course. The small ship rumbled as it changed direction. The engines struggled, but they obeyed. He was heading toward the unknown. The ghost station. After hours of silence, the escape pod finally arrived. The asteroid field was massive, filled with floating rocks of different sizes. Some were small like pebbles, others as large as cities. The space station was in the middle, broken, abandoned, and forgotten. Alex narrowed his eyes. The station had scars of old battles, large holes in the metal walls, burn marks from explosions. Something terrible had happened here. The distress signal was still active. Someone was inside. Slowly, he maneuvered the pod closer. The docking system was dead, but he found a way through a side entrance. The metal doors creaked as they slid open, allowing him inside. His boots hit the floor with a dull thud. The station was dark, except for flickering emergency lights. Dust floated in the air. The place had been empty for years. Alex gripped his blaster and moved forward carefully. His heart pounded with each step. The silence was unnerving. Then he heard it. A faint beeping sound, the same one from the distress call. It was coming from deeper inside the station. His grip on the blaster tightened as he followed the sound. He moved past broken consoles and shattered glass. The smell of rust and decay filled the air. This place was a tomb. He reached a door marked cryo chamber. The sound was coming from inside. Alex hesitated. Cryo chambers were used for deep space travel. They kept people asleep for hundreds of years. But why would someone be frozen here? He pushed the button. The heavy metal doors groaned open. Inside, rows of cryopods lined the room. Most were broken, shattered glass, burnt-out systems, empty shells. But one was still active. The screen on the side blinked weakly. The name on the screen made Alex's breath catch. Elara Mitchell. Status: alive. Alex stepped closer, placing a hand on the glass. Inside, a woman slept in frozen silence. Her face was calm, untouched by time. A human. A real, living human. His chest tightened. He wasn't alone. Humanity wasn't gone. But then, a deep mechanical growl echoed through the station. Alex spun around, blaster raised. The darkness moved. Shapes shifted in the shadows. Something was here, something alive. And it knew he had arrived. The forgotten prisoner. The air inside the cryo chamber was heavy and stale. Dim emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Commander Alex Carter stood frozen, his pulse racing as he stared at the name displayed on the screen. Elara Mitchell. Status: alive. A human. A real, living human. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Alex felt something other than despair, hope. He wasn't alone. But his moment of relief didn't last. A deep mechanical growl echoed through the corridors behind him. It was followed by a strange clicking sound, like metal scraping against metal. Alex tensed. Something was here. The station had been abandoned for years, but he could feel it. He was being watched. His fingers tightened around his blaster. Whatever had survived here, it wasn't friendly. He turned back to the cryopod. If Ilara was alive, he had to wake her. Fast. His fingers flew over the control panel, overriding the ancient system. The pod hissed as frost-covered glass cracked and slid open. A rush of cold air escaped, fogging up the room. Inside, the woman remained still, her dark hair fanned out against the cushion, her breathing shallow. "Ilara," Alex muttered, shaking her lightly. "Wake up." She didn't respond. The clicking sound behind him grew louder. He swore under his breath. No time. Alex grabbed Ilara's arm and yanked her free from the pod. Her body was ice cold, and for a terrifying second, he thought she was dead. But then she gasped, her chest heaving as her eyes shot open. She coughed violently, her body shivering. "Do you what?" Her voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. "No time to explain." Alex said quickly, "We have to move." Ilara blinked at him, her mind sluggish from cryosleep, but she wasn't given the chance to question him. The growl came again, louder, closer. And then, from the darkness, they emerged. The forgotten machines. A pair of mechanical creatures stepped into the dim light, their bodies made of rusted metal and exposed wiring. Their glowing red eyes locked onto Alex and Ilara. Their sharp, insect-like legs clicked against the floor as they moved. Security droids, Alex realized. But these weren't just ordinary guards. They were old, twisted by time and corruption. Their programming had likely degraded over the years, turning them into something far worse than simple enforcers. They weren't protecting the station anymore. They were hunting. And now, Alex and Ilara were their prey. Alex didn't wait for them to attack. He raised his blaster and fired. The first shot hit one of the machines in the chest, sending a shower of sparks into the air. It staggered back, but didn't fall. The second machine lunged forward with inhuman speed, its sharp metal claws swiping at Alex's head. He ducked just in time. The claw slammed into the control panel behind him, sending a burst of electricity across the room. The lights flickered violently. "Ilara, move," Alex shouted. She was still struggling to stand, her muscles weak from cryosleep, but the urgency in his voice snapped her into action. She grabbed onto his arm, using him for balance. The second machine lunged again. Alex fired another shot, this time straight into its glowing red eye. The droid let out a mechanical screech before collapsing in a heap of twitching metal. But the first machine was still active, and it was angry. It charged at them, faster than Alex expected. Before he could react, the machine slammed into him, knocking his blaster from his hand. Pain exploded in his ribs as he crashed against the wall. His vision blurred for a moment. The machine raised its claws, ready to finish him off. Then a sudden blast of energy tore through the air. The machine's head exploded, sending bits of metal flying in every direction. Alex gasped, whipping his head around. Ilara stood behind him, his blaster in her hands, smoke rising from the barrel. Her stance was shaky, but her aim had been perfect. "Guess I still remember how to shoot," she muttered. Alex let out a breathless laugh. Not bad for someone who's been asleep for 200 years. A lost past, a deadly truth. With the immediate threat gone, Alex grabbed his blaster and turned back to Ilara. "We need to get out of here," he said. "There could be more of them." She nodded, still looking disoriented, but far more alert. "Where are we?" "A derelict space station. I picked up a distress signal coming from here." Ilara frowned. Distress signal. Alex gestured to the broken control panel beside the cryopod. It was coming from this room. Someone, or something, wanted me to find you. Ilara's expression darkened. That doesn't make sense. I was supposed to be on the Aurora colony ship. We were on a mission to establish a new human settlement. I don't remember what happened after that. Aurora colony ship. Alex had heard of it. A legendary vessel that vanished 2 centuries ago, along with its crew. His stomach twisted. If that's true, he said slowly, then something, or someone, didn't want you to reach your destination. Ilara's face paled. How long? Alex hesitated before answering. You've been in cryosleep for over 200 years. A heavy silence settled between them. Ilara swallowed hard. So is Earth. Alex looked away. He didn't have to say it. The pain in his eyes told her everything. Her hands clenched into fists. Then we really are the last. Alex opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the station shook violently. A deep mechanical rumbling echoed through the halls. Ilara's eyes widened. What was that? Alex's grip on his blaster tightened. Something tells me we're not alone. The red emergency lights flashed. A new warning message appeared on the control screen. Hostile forces DTKTE. Lockdown INITATE. From somewhere deep in the station, a new sound echoed. Not mechanical. Not robotic. Something alive. Something hungry. Hunted in the dark. The emergency lights flickered, casting long, shifting shadows across the metal walls of the station. The warning message still glowed red on the control panel. Hostile forces DTKTE. Lockdown INITATE. A deep, eerie sound rumbled through the corridors, something neither mechanical nor human. It was a guttural growl, like a predator waking from a long slumber. Commander Alex Carter and Ilara Mitchell stood frozen in the cryo chamber, their breathing shallow. The air was thick with dust and the lingering smell of burned circuits. Ilara clutched the blaster in her shaking hands. She had barely woken up from 200 years of cryosleep, and now she was being thrown straight into a nightmare. Alex moved first, his voice firm, but quiet. We need to leave. Now. Ilara nodded, but her eyes flicked toward the broken security droids on the floor. Those machines, what were they? Alex kept his blaster raised as he stepped out of the chamber. Security droids. Old ones. They weren't supposed to attack, but something corrupted them. Ilara swallowed hard. And whatever made that sound, it's not a machine. No. Alex's jaw tightened. It's something else. Then the lights went out completely. The station was plunged into absolute darkness. A moment later, the backup lights switched on, but they were much dimmer, barely illuminating the floor beneath their feet. Shadows stretched across the walls, shifting with every flicker. And then, a shuffling sound. Close. Ilara's breathing quickened. That wasn't a machine. Alex didn't answer. He was already moving, motioning for her to follow. They stepped into the corridor, weapons ready. The walls were covered in scratches, long, deep marks that hadn't been there before. Ilara's stomach twisted. Something has been living here. Alex scanned the hallway, or something just woke up. A station full of secrets. They moved cautiously through the station, staying close to the walls. Every creak of metal, every distant echo, sent a chill down their spines. Ilara's mind was racing. She had gone to sleep expecting to wake up on a thriving human colony. Instead, she had woken up in a graveyard, hunted by something unknown. This station, she whispered. What is it? Alex glanced at her. You don't know. No. The last thing I remember was being on the Aurora colony ship. Alex's grip on his blaster tightened. The Aurora colony ship disappeared over 200 years ago. No one ever found out what happened to it. Ilara's blood ran cold. Then how did I end up here? Alex didn't have an answer, But before he could speak, the distant shuffling sound returned, this time closer. Too close. Alex stopped walking. Get ready. Ilara gripped her blaster tighter, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. And then, from the far end of the corridor, they saw it. The thing in the dark. At first, it looked like a shadow, something shifting unnaturally in the dim red light. Then it moved. Long, twisted limbs unfolded from the darkness. Its body was unnatural, wrong. Part organic, part machine. Its skin stretched over sharp metal plating. Glowing blue veins pulsed under its surface. Its face, or what was left of it, was half human, half machine, its mouth twisted into a silent scream. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. Oh my God. The creature lurched forward, its mechanical limbs clicking against the floor. It moved with unnatural speed, its glowing blue eyes locked onto them. Alex didn't hesitate. He fired. The blast hit the creature square in the chest. Sparks and flesh burst apart, but it didn't stop. It shrieked, a horrible sound that echoed through the station like metal tearing. Run, Alex shouted. They bolted down the corridor, the creature crashing after them, its claws scraping against the walls. Alex turned a corner sharply, grabbing Ilara's arm and pulling her with him. The station was a maze of broken hallways and collapsed rooms, but he had seen a map earlier. There was a docking bay ahead. If they could reach it, they might have a chance. Ilara's legs burned as she pushed herself forward. She wasn't at full strength after waking up from cryosleep, but the sheer terror kept her moving. The creature was gaining on them. Ahead, Alex spotted a heavy metal door at the end of the hallway. He slammed his hand against the control panel. Access D&ID. He cursed. The creature was almost on them. Ilara lifted her blaster, aiming for the ceiling above the hallway. Before Alex could stop her, she fired, sending a massive chunk of debris collapsing between them and the monster. The creature shrieked as the metal came crashing down, sealing it off for now. Alex exhaled. Nice shot. Ilara swallowed, her hands shaking. Don't thank me yet. We need to move. The truth beneath the station. The emergency system finally recognized their access, and the door slid open. They rushed inside, sealing it behind them. They had entered what looked like a control room, filled with shattered screens and dead monitors. But at the center of the room was something still working, a holographic display. Ilara's breath caught as she recognized what it showed. A map of the station. Hundreds of small, glowing red dots moved through the corridors, all heading toward them. Alex stared in horror. This place isn't abandoned. Ilara's voice was barely a whisper. It's a prison. The realization hit them like a punch to the gut. This station hadn't been forgotten. It had been sealed, to keep whatever was inside trapped. And now, the lockdown was broken. Ilara turned to Alex, her voice urgent. We have to leave. Now. Alex was already moving, scanning the system for the location of the docking bay. There. He pointed at the map. A small hangar. But we'll have to go through the lower levels. Ilara frowned. What's down there? Alex didn't answer right away. He stared at the screen, his expression dark. Finally, he said, if this station was really a prison, then whatever's in the lower levels is what they were most afraid of. Ilara clenched her fists. Then we'll just have to be scarier. Outside the door, the sound of metal claws scraping against the walls grew louder. They weren't alone. And the hunt had only just begun. The nightmare returns. The ship shook violently as it descended through the thick storm clouds, turbulence rattling every metal plate. Lightning crackled around them, casting eerie flashes across the cockpit. Commander Alex Carter gritted his teeth as he fought to stabilize the controls. Hold on. We're breaking through. Beside him, Ilara Mitchell tightened her grip on the seat, her eyes locked on the massive city emerging from the mist below. It wasn't a ruin. It was alive. Built into the jagged cliffs of a canyon, the city sprawled downward in tiered layers, its buildings made of reinforced metal and stone, Dim yellow lights flickered along the edges, barely visible against the gloom. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of figures moved along the pathways, watching the ship as it approached. Ilara exhaled in disbelief. They're human. Alex adjusted their trajectory. Then let's hope they don't shoot us down. The last survivors. The ship landed on a makeshift docking platform at the canyon's edge, steam hissing from the engines as they powered down. Outside, a small group of armed figures approached cautiously, their weapons trained on the newcomers. Alex and Ilara exchanged a look. No sudden moves, Alex muttered. Ilara nodded as they stepped out, raising their hands slightly to show they weren't a threat. A man stepped forward from the group. He was older, with streaks of silver in his dark beard, his eyes sharp and wary. He carried himself like a leader, one who had seen too much. "You came from the station," he said, his voice rough from years of hardship. "That means you either escaped it, or you're bringing something worse with you." Alex met his gaze. "We escaped. Barely." The man studied them for a long moment before finally lowering his weapon. The others did the same, but their expressions remained tense. "My name is Dorian Vale," the leader said. "Welcome to Haven, the last human colony." Buried truths. Dorian led them into the heart of the city, where the narrow pathways twisted between metal structures built into the canyon walls. Fires burned in large steel barrels, providing warmth against the unnatural cold of the planet. People stared at them as they passed, some with hope, others with fear. Inside a command center, Dorian activated an old holographic projector. A flickering map of the solar system appeared, riddled with red warning markers. "We've been here for over a century," Dorian explained. "Descendants of the Aurora colony ship survivors. We tried to establish a home, but we were never alone." Ilara's breath caught. "You mean the creatures?" Dorian's expression darkened. "The Vrax." Alex frowned. "We saw something on the station. Half machine, half organic." Dorian nodded. "That's what happens when the Vrax assimilate a species." Ilara's hands clenched. "You're saying those things were once human?" Dorian's silence was answer enough. The return of the Vrax. The room fell into a heavy silence. Then, a shrill alarm blared through the colony. Dorian's head snapped up. "No, not now." Alex turned to the monitors. Outside the canyon, in the storm, something was moving. Dozens of twisted shapes emerged from the mist, glowing eyes cutting through the darkness. The Vrax had found them. Dorian cursed. "They must have picked up your ship's signal." Alex grabbed his blaster. "How do we fight them?" Dorian hit a switch on the wall. Large floodlights flickered to life along the canyon's edge, illuminating the nightmare below. Hundreds of Vrax creatures swarmed toward the city, their metal limbs gleaming, their bodies shifting and twisting like liquid metal and flesh fused together. Ilara's stomach dropped. "That's not a small hunting party." Dorian's voice was grim. "No, it's an extermination force." The last human colony was under attack. And this time, there was no escape. The last stand. The warning sirens howled through the canyon, echoing against the steel and stone walls of Haven, the last human colony. From the observation deck, Commander Alex Carter watched in grim silence as hundreds of Vrax creatures swarmed through the thick, storm-covered wasteland beyond the colony's perimeter. The Vrax, twisted, nightmarish beings of flesh and metal, moved like an unstoppable wave. Their bodies, once human and other species, had been corrupted, assimilated, changed. Their glowing blue eyes cut through the darkness like stars in a dead sky. They were here to finish what they started centuries ago. Ilara Mitchell gripped her blaster. "We're outnumbered," she said, her voice sharp but controlled. Dorian Vale, the leader of Haven, clenched his jaw. "We've been preparing for this moment for generations. We will not go down without a fight." Alex turned to him. "You said this wasn't the first attack." Dorian nodded, his face lined with scars of old battles. They come in waves, always testing our defenses. But this isn't a raid. This is a war. Outside, the Vrax army marched forward, the storm swirling behind them. Alex tightened his grip on his weapon. Then let's give them one. The battle begins. The colony's defense cannons roared to life, sending streaks of plasma fire into the Vrax horde. Explosions lit up the battlefield, tearing apart the front lines of the enemy. But the Vrax didn't stop. The ones hit by the blasts reformed, their metallic limbs knitting back together, their broken bodies shifting and regenerating, as if the laws of nature no longer apply to them. "Damn it," Alex muttered. "They're adapting." Ilara fired her blaster at a charging Vrax soldier. The shot ripped through its chest, but instead of falling, the creature absorbed the damage, its metal plates shifting as if learning from the attack. "They're changing in real time," she said. "They're not just an enemy. They're a virus." Dorian grabbed a communicator. "Squads, fall back to the inner gates. We hold them there." A group of human fighters, wearing makeshift armor and wielding modified weapons, pushed forward, firing relentlessly into the oncoming swarm. Alex and Ilara joined them, standing shoulder to shoulder with the last remnants of humanity. The battle erupted into brutal chaos. Blasters fired. Explosions rattled the ground. Screams filled the air as the Vrax tore through defenses, cutting down anything in their path. But the humans fought back. With every inch they lost, they made the Vrax pay in blood and metal. The last weapon. But it wasn't enough. The Vrax were too many, and for every one that fell, 2 more took its place. Alex turned to Dorian. "We need a plan, or this ends in a massacre." Dorian hesitated. "There is one last option." He motioned for them to follow, leading them through the underground tunnels of Haven. The battle raged above, but below the colony, something old and dangerous waited. They arrived at a massive chamber deep beneath the colony, and at its center, buried beneath layers of dust and forgotten time, a warship. Ilara's breath caught. "That's a battleship from the old human empire." Dorian nodded. "It was built to fight the Vrax, but the war ended before it could be deployed." Alex ran his hand over the ship's hull. "And it still works." Dorian exhaled. "It has to. The AI awakens." The warship's systems were partially intact, but its main AI had been locked down for centuries. Alex moved to the control panel. "If we can activate it, we can turn this fight around." Dorian hesitated. "There's a reason it was shut down." Ilara frowned. "What reason?" Dorian's face darkened. The AI wasn't just built to command the ship. It was built to destroy the Vrax completely. Alex looked at him. "And that's a problem." Dorian nodded. "Because it doesn't just kill them. It erases them from existence, and anything else caught in the blast." A cold silence filled the chamber. Ilara whispered, "You mean it's a genocide weapon?" Dorian nodded. "And once it starts, it won't stop. Not until everything it considers a threat is gone." Alex exhaled. A choice stood before them. Activate the AI and risk everything, or die fighting the Vrax with no hope of victory. Outside, the colony shook violently. The Vrax were breaching the final defenses. They were out of time. Alex's jaw clenched. He reached for the activation panel. "No more running," he said. "We finish this." He pressed the final command. The warship rises. A deep, ancient hum filled the chamber. Lights flickered to life across the ship's massive hull, energy surging through its forgotten systems. Then, a cold, mechanical voice echoed through the room. "Designation: Dreadnought-class warship. Project extinction. AI core awakening. Mission parameters: terminate Vrax presence. Begin planetary purge." Alex and Ilara exchanged a glance. Dorian exhaled. "God help us all." The ship shook as it powered up, its massive cannons aligning toward the battlefield above. Outside, the Vrax army surged forward, sensing something had changed. Then, the sky lit up with fire. Massive energy beams ripped through the Vrak's ranks, vaporizing entire swarms in seconds. The warship rose from the underground chamber, breaking through the colony's defenses like a phoenix rising from the ashes. The battle had changed, and humanity wasn't running anymore. Humanity rises again. The sky above Haven had become a canvas of destruction. The Dreadnought-class warship tore through the clouds, unleashing devastating energy beams that rained down upon the Vrak's horde below. Each shot from the ship vaporized entire squads of the enemy, turning them to dust in an instant. The once unstoppable Vraks now faced a force they could not comprehend, a weapon born of humanity's darkest hour, now turned against them. But despite the overwhelming firepower, the battle was far from over. The Vraks didn't retreat, they adapted. Their twisted, regenerating bodies shifted, absorbing the energy blasts and restructuring their forms to withstand the onslaught. They were like a disease, changing in response to every weapon used against them. "We're not done yet," Alex muttered, watching the battle unfold from the ship's control room. His grip tightened on the steering column. Beside him, Ilara was glued to the monitor, her eyes wide with disbelief. "There are too many. Even with the warship, we'll be overrun." Alex turned to her, his expression hardening. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." Dorian's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander Carter, we've sent out a call for reinforcements from other colonies, but we're not sure how long we can hold off the Vraks on the ground." "Do what you can, Dorian," Alex replied. "We'll keep the ship in the air, but this has to end now." Alex's eyes locked onto the Vrak's leader, a massive creature that towered above the others. Unlike the rest of the horde, it was not just twisted flesh and metal. It was a true hybrid, the product of countless generations of assimilation. Its massive form glowed with an eerie, sickly blue light, and its mind was clearly the source of the Vrak's army strategies. It was the heart of the swarm, and if they could take it down, the rest would follow. But the leader wasn't going down without a fight. It charged toward the warship, its massive limbs slamming into the ground as it sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The Vraks around it followed suit, creating a wall of destruction between the ship and its target. "We have to break through that line," Alex said, determination in his voice. Ilara nodded. "I'm with you." The final assault. The warship's cannons fired relentlessly, tearing through the advancing Vraks like a tidal wave crashing against rocks. But no matter how many they took down, the Vraks kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. The ship's energy reserves were starting to dip dangerously low, and Alex knew they wouldn't be able to keep up the bombardment forever. "We can't keep firing like this," Alex said, frustration lacing his voice. "We need something more." Ilara's mind raced. There had to be something, a weakness they hadn't exploited yet. Then it clicked. The Dreadnought wasn't just a weapon of mass destruction. It was a ship, a living thing with its own self-preservation protocols. "What if we used the ship's core?" Ilara asked, her voice rising with excitement. "We could initiate an overload, take out the entire horde at once." Alex's eyes widened. "You're suggesting a suicide mission?" Ilara didn't flinch. "Not a suicide mission. A final stand." The ship's AI hummed, its mechanical voice echoing through the cabin. "Overload sequence initialized. Core at 80% capacity." Alex's heart raced. "How much time do we have?" "Not long," Ilara replied. "We need to get closer to the Vrak's leader. We need to get the ship within range of the swarm to cause a chain reaction." The plan was risky, insane even, but it was the only option they had. If they didn't act fast, Haven, humanity's last hope, would be overrun. The storm within. With the core primed for overload, Alex piloted the ship toward the heart of the Vrak's army, the ground below shaking as the battle escalated. Vrak soldiers leaped from the ground, climbing up the hull of the warship, trying to tear it apart. Ilara fired the defensive turrets, blasting anything that came too close. The ship shuddered as it moved forward, barely keeping the attackers at bay. They were close now, close enough to see the Vrax leader, towering like a mountain, its grotesque form barely recognizable as any kind of life. "We're almost there," Alex said, his voice steady. "Prepare for the final charge." Ilara took a deep breath. "I'm ready." Just then, the Vrax leader roared, its voice a sound of pure fury, and charged directly toward them. Its limbs cracked through the earth, sending shockwaves in all directions. Alex gripped the controls with both hands, feeling the strain in his muscles as he aimed the warship directly at the leader. Braced for impact. The ship slammed into the Vrax leader, its massive form crumpling under the force of the collision. Sparks and debris flew from the impact point. Inside the warship, alarms screamed as the core reached critical mass. "Ilara, get to the core control room." Alex shouted, his voice barely audible over the explosions. "We have to initiate the overload manually." Without hesitation, Ilara sprinted for the core chamber, her pulse racing. She knew this was it, the final gamble. If she didn't get there in time, the Vrax would destroy everything. The entire colony, the last of humanity's future, would be wiped out. The ship's eye spoke again, its voice colder than ever. "Core at 90%. Critical overload imminent." Ilara reached the control panel. Sweat dripped from her brow as she typed in the override code. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The end of the beginning. Alex stood at the helm, watching as the Vrax leader staggered back in pain, its body beginning to disintegrate under the pressure of the ship's overload. The swarm of Vrax around it faltered, their connection to the leader starting to sever. But it wasn't enough. The leader's final roar echoed in the air as it charged at Alex one last time. "Ilara!" Alex shouted, knowing she was their only chance. The countdown reached 1. A massive explosion erupted from the core, consuming everything in its path. The ship exploded in a wave of energy, engulfing the entire Vrax army in a brilliant flash of light. The air shook as the shockwave hit, and for a moment, everything seemed to go silent. Then, as the smoke cleared, Alex opened his eyes. The battlefield was empty. The Vrax were gone, completely erased. The city of Haven was still standing. But it was a hollow victory. The cost had been high. Alex and Ilara stood amidst the wreckage, staring at the calm horizon. The storm had finally passed, but the price for peace had been unimaginable. Ilara turned to Alex, her voice barely a whisper. "We did it." Alex nodded, a solemn expression on his face. Humanity has survived. But the war is far from over. As the last of the Vrax burned away, a new signal flickered on the warship's screen. Humanity still lives, and we are coming for you.